Hello everyone, welcome to Spruce Hills Community Church Online. My name is Isaiah, I'm the lead pastor here. If you're watching for the first time, we want to say welcome. We're so glad to see you. This is our last Sunday of being online only. Next week we're back in the building. Right now the capacity is at 50. We're hoping that will increase soon. Registration will open tomorrow, so watch out for that. I want to say a big thank you to Paul Snow, Jeremy Wells, and Jason Ball for leading us in worship today, for recording. I want to say a big thank you to Chris Smith for doing the sound for this. And this has been a learning process for all of us here, learning how to do this, so bear with us as we do this. Next week, even if you can't attend in person, we plan on doing a live stream if everything works out. And so you'll be able to watch live on Facebook here at 10 a.m. next Sunday. And every Sunday after, hopefully we can stay open forever. And if not, you can watch on demand on YouTube at any time. Just search our channel, Spruce Hills Community Church, and you should find us there. This morning, I really want you to simply experience the presence of God wherever you're to. That's my heart in all this. Even though we're not in the building, we can still experience Him, experience His presence, experience His grace, His love. And I know it's been a couple of gray, foggy days, and who knows when we'll see the sun again, so hopefully this brightens your day. So enjoy your coffee, your tea, whatever you're drinking this morning, and just worship with us. Let us know if you're watching, comment, say hi. We'd love to hear from you. And take a moment right now if you're comfortable to share this service, because you don't know who will stumble across us, and just hear the message of hope today in Jesus. So thank you again for watching, and we'll see you real soon.
Good morning, Spruce. It is so good to have you here online with us again. This is our last online service. If you missed the announcement, next Sunday, April the 18th, we are going to be here live in person. So stay tuned to social media. Follow the directions for registration. They'll have the guidelines. And we are so excited to get back in person and worship with you guys. We're just coming off Easter weekend. We're going to keep these songs going because Jesus is still alive and He cannot be stopped. So if you know this, sing this with us.
Dark tried to hide you and steal you away. Death tried to keep you inside of the grave. The enemy fought, tried, but he lost. You cannot be stopped. We cried for freedom, tore down the walls. Weight of our burdens, you carried it all. Fears and our failures, dead on the cross. You cannot be stopped. stop our God. There is nothing that can stop our God. There is nothing. There is nothing. There is nothing that can stop our God. There is nothing that can stop our God. There is nothing that can stop our God. There is nothing. There is nothing. There is nothing that can stop our God. There is nothing that can stop our God. There is nothing that can stop our God. There is nothing. Mover of mountains, breaker of chains, Jesus is triumph over the grave. Sing hallelujah, battle is won. Nothing can stand against our God. Mover of mountains, breaker of chains, Jesus is triumph over the grave. Sing hallelujah, battle is won. Nothing can stand against our God. Sing hallelujah, battle is won. Nothing can stand against our God. When all I see is a battle, you see my victory. When all I see is a mountain, you see a mountain move. And as I walk through the shadow, your love surrounds me. There's nothing to fear now, for I am safe with you. So when I fight, I'll fight on my knees, with my hands lifted high. Oh God, battle belongs to you, and every fear I lay at your feet. I'll sing through the night. Oh God, battle belongs to you. And if you are for me, can be against me. For Jesus, there's nothing impossible for you. When all I see are the ashes, you see the beauty. When all I see is a cross, God, you see the empty tomb. So when I fight, I'll fight on my knees, with my hands lifted high. Oh God, battle belongs to you, and every fear I lay at your feet. I'll sing through the night. Oh God, battle belongs to you. No mighty fortress, you go before us. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. Shine in the shadows, win every battle. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. No mighty fortress, you go before us. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. Shine in the shadows, win every battle. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. No mighty fortress, you go before us. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. Shine in the shadows, win every battle. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. So when I fight, I'll fight on my knees with my hands lifted high. Oh God, battle belongs to you, and every fear I lay at your feet. I'll sing through the night. Oh God, battle belongs to you. Oh God, battle belongs to you.
We're jumping back into our series in the book of Philippians today. And this is both a refresher, sort of the ground we've covered, and a finisher to chapter 2 if you've been following along in this series. And if you haven't been following along, then no worries. If there's a good time, if there's a best time to start following and journeying with us through this book, then now is that time. We've covered almost half. By the end of this message, we will have covered half of this short 4-chapter book found in the New Testament, written by the Apostle Paul from a time when he was in prison. And we're going to jump back into chapter 2, sort of wrap up chapter 2 today before we resume this series in person next week. And so we paused this series to celebrate Easter. And although Easter is over, the theme of Easter does not disappear. So in chapter 2, we've been discussing the selfless giving of Jesus. Paul talks about the importance of unity and humility in a faith community, of being of one mind and one spirit. He wants this church, the people in Philippi, to work together towards achieving one main goal, and that goal is stated in verse 27 of chapter 1, only to let your lives be to live your life in a manner worthy of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And we've been talking about unity and humility. And if there's something that tests your character or your resilience as a follower of Jesus, it's living selflessly. It's living out humility. But humility is such a vital part to any healthy faith community. And you would think that humility would be easy to achieve because we admire it when we see it in others. And the flip side of humility is pride and arrogance, and we really don't like that. We don't like seeing it in other people when we're like, oh, they're so full of themselves and whatever. And so you think that we would strive towards humility and want humility, and we do. It's just hard because it involves putting others before yourself. What does humility look like? For the Apostle Paul, he says it this way in chapter 2, verses 3 through 5. He says, do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. Let each of you look not only to his own interest, but also to the interests of others. Have this mind among yourselves, which is yours in Christ Jesus. So have the mind of Jesus. What did Jesus do? What was the mind of Jesus? And this is what we celebrate during Easter and all year. He goes on to say, verses 6 through 8, Jesus, though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself by taking the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of men, and being found in human form, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. Paul says, look to Jesus, who did not, take advantage of his right to being God. Rather, he emptied himself. He took the form of a servant. He became human, and he died for us as an act of his love. And he says, died to the point of dying on a cross. And during this time, the cross wasn't, a piece of jewelry that you wore. The cross was marked by scorn and shame. It was disgraceful. It was an embarrassing way to die. And that's how far Jesus went to demonstrate the love of God for us. So Jesus is the ultimate example of humility. Paul himself is an example of humility. As he writes this letter to one of the churches he planted, he writes from prison. And I'm reminded today that he could have focused on himself. He could have focused on his own problems and his own trials and what he thought was his own rights. Rather, he finds himself in prison focusing on others, giving to others, putting others before himself. And he says he's joyful and he's glad about this. In chapter 2, verse 17, he says, "Even if I am poured out as a drink offering upon the sacrificial offering of your faith, I am glad and rejoice with you all." Paul finds joy in suffering because of how he understands how his selfless living is impacting others. And if you're anything like me, you think to yourself, well, that's Jesus and Paul. Right? Like Jesus, the GOAT, the greatest of all time. Like, yeah, obviously he can live this out. He can be humble and live in humility. And Paul, he's like this legend, like this pillar of the New Testament church and this amazing person. And obviously they can do this because of who they are. We don't really relate and don't really think that we too can live this out because we can't compare, we can't measure up to them. But then, in the end of chapter 2, there's these two examples, two average people just like you and I living this out. The first is a guy named Timothy, and Timothy is Paul's protege. Timothy is Paul's sidekick in ministry. Paul was a mentor to Timothy and trained him, and oftentimes Timothy would travel with Paul and care for churches and pastor churches for Paul. And Paul writes of Timothy in verses 19 through 24 as an example of humility. He says, "I hope in the Lord Jesus to send Timothy to you soon." The church in Philippi, Paul wants to send Timothy to you soon so that I too may be cheered by the news of you. For, listen to what he says here in verse 20. "For I have no one like him who will genuinely be concerned for your welfare. For they all seek their own interests, not those of Jesus Christ. But you know Timothy's proven worth, how as a son with a father he has served me in the gospel. I hope therefore to send him to you just as soon as I see as it will go with me. And I trust in the Lord that I shortly myself will come also." Notice what sets Timothy apart. Paul says, "I have no one like him." Why? Because in verse 21 he says, he compares him to some other group of people who only care about themselves, who only care about their own self-interest. But he says, Timothy's not like this. I have no one like him. And Timothy would have meant a lot to Paul. So Paul, wanting to send Timothy, send them his best, send Timothy to them, is another act of Paul's humility. Timothy is humble. He lives in the way of humility. And he lives out chapter 1, verse 27. He lives his life in a manner worthy of the gospel. He lives out chapter 2, verses 3 through 4, putting others before himself, not doing anything from selfish ambition or conceit or pride. Timothy is living for a greater story. He's living a life worthy of the gospel of Christ, and he wants to put others before himself. Timothy is an example of humility. Timothy has the mind of Christ. That's the first example. The second example is Epaphroditus. And what's unique about him is not just his name, is that Epaphroditus would have been the individual traveling from Philippi to Rome to give Paul an update on how the church is going, but also he brought a monetary donation and some support from the church in Philippi, gifted to the Apostle Paul, who would have been in prison. And we get the idea of this in chapter 4, verse 18. And Paul, again, being in prison conditions being much different than they are today, would have had to rely on others for food or money to buy food, and would have had to rely on others in order to just survive. And the Philippian church couldn't send Paul a check in the mail. They couldn't just e-transfer him some money. So Epaphroditus, I'm going to call him Big E, literally travels to Philippi travels to Rome on behalf of the Philippians to show and support Paul. And here's what Paul says about Epaphroditus. He's given them an update on him. He says in verse 25, "I have thought it necessary to send Epaphroditus, my brother and fellow worker and fellow soldier, and your messenger and minister to my need. For he has been longing for you all and has been distressed because you heard that he was ill. Indeed, he was ill, near to death, but God had mercy on him, and not only on him, but on me also, lest I should have sorrow upon sorrow. I am more eager to send him, therefore, that you may rejoice at seeing him again, and that I may be less anxious. So receive him in the Lord with all joy, and honor such men, for he nearly died for the work of Christ, risking his life to complete what was lacking in your service to me. The interesting thing about Epaphroditus, as Paul alludes to here, is that he becomes significantly ill on his journey from Philippi to Rome to visit Paul in prison. And it's suggested that Paul may have been in prison in Rome, which is a significant distance away from ancient Philippi, anywhere from 1,100 to 1,900 kilometers apart. And so thinking about it in our time, Paradise to Halifax is a good reference. It's about the middle of that 1,100 to 1,900. Paradise to Halifax is about 1,500 kilometers along. And so in light of the Atlantic bubble opening up, say you want to go on a little Atlantic bubble vacation, you want to travel from Paradise to Halifax, you would likely travel via a nice, comfortable airplane, which would get you there very quickly, or you would hop in your car and travel on a nice, big, comfortable boat, Marine Atlantic, arrive in North Sydney, and then make the rest of the drive to Halifax. And this is exactly how Epaphroditus could not have done it. It was not a pleasant journey. It wasn't easy. It wasn't comfortable. And somewhere along the journey, he nearly dies. Why is Paul including these details? Why is he, updating the Philippian church on this matter? I believe it fits into the larger context of what he's trying to preach to this church. And that message is live for others, serve others, sacrifice for others, embrace humility, have the mind of Jesus. And in all of that, find joy. Find the joy that comes with serving and sacrificing your life. It's interesting to me, the author of Hebrews says in chapter 2, verse 2, for the joy set before him, Jesus endured the cross. There's a unique joy to be found in living selflessly. And so Big E, Epaphroditus, like Timothy, is a living example of what it means to embrace selfless living. He nearly sacrifices his life to serve both Paul and his faith community. And that's commitment. And so why does he do this? We come back to the why. We come back to everything that Paul is telling us in chapter 2. And it comes down to this, friends, they were invested into the greater story that God was writing in their lives and through their lives. They were living for something greater. Here's where all the themes come together so far in this series. They were living for something greater. They were living out their identity as citizens of heaven, although residents on earth. They were living out the identity piece and the calling piece of living a life worthy of the gospel of Jesus Christ. They were living out doing nothing from selfish ambition or conceit. They were living out life rooted in humility, counting others more significant than themselves. A greater story, a greater unity, a greater humility, a greater life, all rooted in the gospel and person of Jesus. Rooted in the person who demonstrated this first, Jesus, who took the form of a servant and died on a cross as a demonstration of the love of God. And now Jesus invites you and I into this way of life, which starts when we are in a relationship with Him, and then slowly but surely we move towards having these attitudes and this posture and this heart and this mindset of Christ. I believe this is exactly what Jesus meant when He said in Matthew 16, verse 24, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. Being a follower of Jesus means losing your life in order to find it, Being a follower of Jesus means forfeiting the way of the world, but finding your soul. And this isn't a one-time decision. It starts with a one-time decision, but it's not a one-time decision. It's a lifelong journey and commitment. Unless you're someone who humility comes natural to, it involves a continual rewiring and repatterning of your mind. Have the mind of Christ. Have the mind of Christ. Have the mind of Christ. And ultimately today, as we close, this is ultimately what it means to be the church. This is what it means to be a faith community. This is what it means to be God's people. One of the words in Greek for church is ecclesia, which simply means called out. The church is the called out ones of God. What are we called out to be? We are called out to be a new humanity. We are called out to be a community of life and light in darkness. We are called out to be a community of hope in the midst of hopelessness and brokenness. We are called out to be a community of humility in a world that seeks power, fame, and wealth. And here's my heart as the leader of Spruce Hills Community Church. I want this church. I want this faith community. I want this living representation of Jesus' people to be known as a church that has the mind of Jesus. A church that invests in people. A church that invests into our community. A church that serves greatly when it costs much. When it costs a great amount, let it be known that we are a church that has a servant's heart. A church that invests in people. And in order to get there, you and I, we each have a role to play. I want every single individual who calls Spruce their home, their family, to be serving in some area or aspect of ministry. And I'm telling you today, if you're not currently in a place where you're volunteering or serving, there's a place for you to serve. It might be holding up a sign on the parking lot or propping up a door. It might be sitting at the registration table and checking people in. It might be brewing coffee when we get there. Come on. It might be brewing coffee. It might be cleaning the bathroom. It might be serving kids or loving students. It might be singing or playing in the band or doing sound or helping out with the live stream. It might be something completely behind the scenes, but there's a place for you to serve. And I just want to encourage you today to take a moment, if you're not currently serving, to pause and to pray and ask the Holy Spirit to reveal to you an area for you to serve, to prompt you with something that you can exercise and serve in. And I just want to encourage you today as we head into another week to apply this just to how you to live your life. I encourage you again to have the mind of Jesus, which means putting others first and serving others. It means practicing the way of Jesus every single day, no matter where we find ourselves. And that's what I want to leave you with today and encourage you with as you go about the upcoming week and days. And so I want to say thank you today for watching us, to listening to this message. And I just want to encourage you today with that as we worship and sing as we close.
There's a us with your majesty. There's a peace that's calming my water. There's a joy replacing my grief. He's the light feeding my darkness. There's redemption calling and causing all to sing. Father, will you come and open up our eyes? Fill us with your heart, renew us with your life, consume us with your majesty. Consume us with your majesty. We're singing, Father, will you come and open up our eyes? Fill us with your heart, renew us with your life, consume us with your majesty. Consume us with your majesty. Glory, honor, power belong to you. 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 Father, will you come and open up our eyes? Fill us with your heart, renew us with your life, consume us with your majesty. Consume us with your majesty. We're singing, Father, will you come and open up our eyes? Fill us with your heart, renew us with your life, consume us with your majesty. Consume us with your majesty. We're singing, Father, will you come and open up our eyes? Fill us with your heart, renew us with your life, consume us with your majesty. Consume us with your majesty.